So yeah, thank you for every listeners. Today I'm
Right.
very honored to invite Gary from Brussels in Belgium. She's an expert of particle processes. I'm very glad to have a call with her to make the careers the processes of new regulations in Europe. So yeah, thank you for coming in, Gary, this moment.
Yeah, you're welcome. Sorry.
Thank you. And first of all, I'd like to introduce her background. She holds a doctorate in contemporary history, specializing in international relations and defense. She was a Fulbright scholar at the University of Washington. She has been involved in EU digital policy for 20 years, both in and out of the European Commissions, during which she worked in a range of policy areas, from e-government to smart and sustainable cities and the UN Urban Agenda. Gary currently works as an independent policy analyst and recently contributed as expert to the work of the EU Urban Agenda Digital Transitions Partnership. Her current interests include the digital identities, geocoded statistics, satellite imaging, and the geopolitical implications of the ongoing push for all three. So, Gary, very great appreciated to be here today.
Same from my side. Thank you.
Thank you. So let's move to the today's interview topics. As I mentioned about the introductions, you have a very great experience in a political field in Europe. You have the experiences in American academics so far.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering how did you come to this field, and what is your motivations to work on the political matters in Europe?
Well, when I received my Fulbright uh, grant, I picked only one university, and I was lucky I got it. And it was the University of Washington in Seattle, and that was in 1994. And basically, the year Seattle was already very big because of Microsoft, but also because uh, what was the famous singer had just died, committed suicide. Um, so Seattle was big on the map. I wanted to go there, and I found myself there. And once I was at the university, just about everyone I met either knew someone working at Microsoft or had worked at Microsoft or was going to work at Microsoft. So you couldn't avoid it. At the same time, we had really incredible equipment. And it was the very first year the internet was, let's say, not privatized, but open to the general public in the US. It was actually the second year. It was the first year of HTML anyway, the first year of the web. So I was there from the beginning in a way. And it soon became clear that the matter of the internet was very closely related to defense. And that's where I started, because I was doing my PhD on a topic that was related to US-China relations, and the period I was studying was finishing. Actually, I finished the thesis in '99, and I covered the periods all the way to '96. So it was very much that same period I was studying in some fashion, even though it's history. so that's how I started being involved. And then I went to work in London to repay my debts for university, let's say. And at that point, I worked for a big, the largest company organizing events for business. And once I was there, I got really interested in the topic of the telecom, and I started a business with a then colleague, producing a newsletter on the wireless industry. And then I moved to Brussels, and because I was already involved in the wireless industry, I found some work working on the topic for a consultancy on EU policy, and I never stopped. And then I was hired by the Commission. I got more directly involved on EU policy. But so what that means is I saw the evolution of digital policy from within DG Connect, which is the part of the Commission that works on digital policy. I saw the evolution from 1999 when I arrived in Brussels, or 2001 when I started at the Commission, even more so, all the way to now. So I have the benefit of observing firsthand fairly long trends. So there you go.
Yeah, that's very interesting stories. So is there anything that has been changed since you have assigned as a first policy support, maybe just 20 years ago? Then nowadays, many European policy is try to underline in the new regulations in the digital space. So what has been changed since first year assignment then?
Well, maybe I'll surprise you, but I say everything that's happening now was already pretty clear to me and to anyone who was closely involved. Let's say everything that was going to be problematic or every major change was already developing in the early 2000s. What I mean is, for example, the matter of privacy. There was a lot of us who were working on this topic, on the topic of digital, were already acutely aware of what was coming, because everything we read was about what was coming. And at the time, it was quite shocking the way the companies that were building the equipment, in particular the mobile phones, were completely disregarded. At the time, the enthusiasm was so great, and even though the problem of privacy to be coming was clear, at the same time it was almost impossible to discuss it. It was very fringe. So a lot of us who were working on these topics developed a certain reluctance to discuss it really at the beginning, and then we just took it on ourselves. So what that means in my case is it took me until 2017 to get my first smartphone, because I was so terrified at the idea of having one. So that was one thing. And then the other thing was same thing with digitalizing public government processes. The very first topic I worked on was e-government. There was a really big conference in 2001 in e-government organized by the Commission. And that conference led to a ministerial agreement called the Laken Declaration, if I remember. And in that ministerial agreement, which laid out the plans for future EU policy for the long run, a lot of the surveillance was already pretty obvious, even though it wasn't stated as such, but you could see there was a lot in So what I mean is, the bureaucratic machines always work in very long spans of time, and even though the people involved in making it happen are not always aware, or are a bit easily distracted from paying attention to the bigger trends. The bigger trends were pretty obvious for anyone who wanted to look at it, especially the disturbing ones. But there was it was very hopeful then in the late 90s, and then it was again very hopeful in the early 2010, when you know, some people were waking up to the problems and looking for solutions. But the structure of the industry, the structure of the digital industry changed for the worse after that, in the sense that the room for freedom was basically crushed. I think we're going back to some amount of freedom eventually now, bizarrely, if we can escape the current trouble. Simply because people are demanding it, unlike 10 years ago when they were just mesmerized by gadgets.
I understand. Yeah.
I don't know if you remember. I guess you're probably too young to remember. But even if you were not very even if one was not very competent with computers, there was a lot more you could do with your PC, playing around, tweaking, than you can do now. You know, for a start, okay, there was a lot of pirated software circulating, that's for sure. There was a lot less problems with virus, but also there was a lot less information of critical nature on people's personal devices. So people felt like they were more like toys. So you could play around with it and you could learn things that you designed for yourself, yeah, not some kind of learning package or something. There was a lot more personal craft in your discovering going on then. That's what's missing now, I think.
I see. Yes. So maybe we have 2 decades since you started the job. Then a lot of digital sphere has been changed, such as the big corporations coming from the United States, the Facebook,
yeah, but if you remember, sorry to interrupt you. If you remember 20, I mean, you won't remember, there's no reason why, but 20 years ago, there were also big corporations. Just as big as now. I mean, okay, overall, there was not as much of a monopoly situation in the economy, even in the Western economies, but in which I include Japan, of course. But if you remember, the big companies like Sony or IBM or had enormous control on their own domain. Yes. So there was as much. It was just a different set of players. It was more hardware and devices manufacturers, and now it's contents to start with. And now we're going back again to hardware, because all these content companies, in which I include Google and Facebook, they're all building their own network, their own satellite networks, their own cables. Google is investing a huge amount, and so is Facebook, in undersea cables between the US and Europe right now. And no one is paying attention to that. I mean, people are paying attention to the satellites, but the satellite part is the bit that I find the most disturbing, to be honest.
Let's see. So from the cyberspace market is growing much so fast, and this is the one argument, such as the you mentioned in data protection, the privacy coexisting and the cyberspace of business. From the European Commission, just releasing a many political proposal, the forerunning the data protection in the GDPR related to the privacy, strengthen the regulations, as well as the many other things involved. From the perspective, so what kind of the technical governance is the requirements for the future business, such as we see the transparency, the compliances, the ethics, the explicit consent, the many things that requires the under GDPR. So what do you think the best efforts for them?
Well, I guess it depends on the size of the business, but if you take anyone developing a solution around and that involves collecting personal data, well, those people should bear in mind that holding on to the data is as much a liability as it is an asset. And it's a liability, if nothing else, because the demand of the public for some degree of privacy protection, I note, is not exclusive to the EU. It's growing simultaneously for the same reason, in fact, in other parts of the world, which is governments are now looking at it like privacy is the selling argument to their population, but the real stake is sovereignty. From their point of view, from the way government operates, yes. So perhaps it's the first time, at least in the EU, that it's clear in just about every politician's mind that the control over personal data on the grounds of privacy is actually very aligned with urgent protection of sovereignty. Now, so what I mean by that is for businesses that are already operating or planning to operate with digital data, yeah, personal data. Mm-hmm. With those businesses, that what that means is whatever that business model is, they could find themselves exposed to liabilities that they didn't expect. And that could be substantial costs that they haven't forecasted. And that's not just for the sake of operating with the EU, that will be operating in different regions, because right now on different continents, just about every government that has some kind of power of decision making over that is seeking to look at what the other governments are doing and trying to reach that same level. I note, for example, that in the recent trade agreements at the ASEAN, the one signed in your part of the world about a week ago or 2 weeks ago now, it makes it explicit, the text of the declaration that makes it explicit that the intent between all your governments is to keep the discussion, the discussion on what the location of data and the matters of privacy are clearly identified as topics that will evolve, that need to be left on the table to discuss further. So I think we should all keep an eye on what's happening at the WTO to see if there's, I think there's a proposal coming on the 15th of December, and we should keep an eye on that to see whether there will be some kind of global agreement. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, there is an enormous demand of the general public for some degree of protection, and the general public's distrust vis-à-vis their government is fairly high, especially in the EU right now. So anyone who comes up with a solution that can protect an individual in some respect, and that is sufficiently credible without being, so basically anyone who can offer a service without collecting data will, where their competitors do collect data, will see an advantage. Of course, it's a problem because right now the appeal of collecting data is enormous because all the big AI companies and organizations are all looking for new data sets, legal or otherwise. And there's a huge market, including a black market, presumably, for enormous personal data sets, especially in healthcare. And right now, in fact, I look at the proposal, the Common Pass proposal, you know, the one that was tested on the Cathay Pacific flight recently. Do you know what I mean?
So this is
yeah.
It's a very complicated. I think it's a very kind of you that's explained as a more kind of the example or something for the listeners.
Sorry, I didn't hear.
Okay, I think it's a very complicated. That's just kind of give any examples for the listeners. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's actually it's not so complicated. It's just that we are at a transition period. So there's only two ways to look at the matter of data, personal data collected. Yeah. If you're a business, let's say you develop an application or whatever, actually there's three ways. One way is to ignore the law and do collect things illegally, or else store them illegally, store the data illegally and make money like that. But that's piracy, let's say. But and that's unfortunately what many application providers are doing. Because there's a lot of demand from governments, militaries all over the world for data. The other strategy is to offer a service or a product which doesn't collect data, compared to stand out from competitors who are all collecting data. That's another thing. And the final thing is to put oneself in one of the as part of one of the monopoly controls of one segment, and in which case your customer is not the individual user, but the company for which you are collecting the data, even if you need a mass users to be attractive. But all in all, I would wait, because except for the option on developing a small solution that is not collecting data, or the other two, I would wait, because the legislation is coming and standards are coming that are decided at government level right now, globally, and the situation will change in the next 18 months for sure. So investing now would be a bit risky, I'd say. And I don't know if you follow that, but there's a law at the UN, in this model law at the UN, in the UNICITRAL, which is the part of the UN that prepares legal model laws to be adopted internally by the member states. Yeah, I'm talking the UN now, not the EU. And there's a very interesting. There was fast progressing work at UNICITRAL for some kind of recognition of the identity providers globally. So for the purpose of making payments globally, yeah, facilitating the development of a global payment structure. Interestingly, 3 weeks ago, the US, for the first time in years, contributed a document where they basically oppose what's on the table. So that's going to slow down a bit. And they have good reasons, and it's interesting to read anyway. What was on the table was mainly driven by the EU at that point. So that means that the payment sector, which was probably the one that looked the most promising for the companies involved as far as a global playground, let's say, for identity used on the internet, perhaps the payment processing is not going to be the sector where that takes the fastest growth. Perhaps it will be health. Okay, I should go back a bit. There's a general consensus, yeah, that, and in fact we are there already, but there's been a general consensus that the majority of online of people's online experience would be done through the use of identity. Like you would no longer be browsing anonymously anywhere for the majority of cases. That wasn't the demand of the basic consumer. None of us wanted that as basic consumers, except for banking, let's say. But the cybersecurity requirements and the simple attraction of collecting personal data means everyone else, that is all the players of the industry and the governments, are interested in making that happen. So this is the way we're going anyway. But they've been trying for a long time, and it took them a while to convince the rest of us to do it. But now we're there now. We simply, in most cases, cannot log on unless we identify ourselves. And that part of that identification is available to the various players we interact with once online. Sometimes we want it, sometimes we don't. But the question was always that they wanted, it would make it easier for all the companies involved to have a single format for identity, simply because it makes cleaning up, processing your data afterwards a lot easier and a lot less costly. If you can just match behavioral data, let's say, with somebody's demographic details and location and all that, and purchasing power and all the other information you can collect otherwise. It just makes the data a lot more valuable for companies. And so everyone was clamoring for a single identity standard, so everyone could basically match everybody with their data elsewhere. And that is still a push, but this is in complete contradiction with the aspirations to privacy. It basically, if we got to that point of having a unique standard of identity from birth to death, that is a number basically that would be easily digitally, as you say, recorded forever. First of all, if there's ever any mistake in that data, we're found individually. Sorry for the language, but also if that's the case, then there's no way to protect anyone's privacy at that point. Because whatever you leave as a trace somewhere will always be, everything will be easily de-anonymized. But the push is still there. The push is still there for health data, for health profiles, and the push is there for payment processing purposes. And there's a lot of sectors where there's an attempt at having, as pushing for this, but health education and payment processing, and in fact, online banking are the main push.
I see.
So, but do you have a particular type of business in mind for which you?
Oh, I imagine that's the such a kind of the platformers. A lot of their business model is based on the horizontally is gaining the user interactions through the algorithmic approach, the collecting many data from the based on the vertical actions such as the third parties, then software development kits, or any other data collectioners can be easy to examine how the consumer has been attracted on the digital world. They can easily to identify the customers direct, and they can get the benefits through the targeting the consumers.
Yeah,
So,
but that's not the, but this is not what you described, which is the prevalent model right now. Yeah, you have to remember that the customer is not the client there. So the client has been so far for, if you take Google and Facebook, let's say the client was the advertiser, yeah? Advertising was the revenue stream. So the customer was the product famously, yeah? The problem is, what do you do when your customer has a declining purchasing power? Not just that, but we now know that, I mean, it is likely that both in the case of Facebook and Google, it's now, I think they plateaued their advertising revenue. So that's why they're seeking revenues from governments, because that's who is paying for that kind of surveillance now. Because there's only so much you can advertise for a start. Well, when in countries with aging populations like yours or mine, what happens is as you grow older, first of all, you spend less because you need less, and in any case, after this situation of the pandemic, there will be decreasing purchasing power. So the purpose of surveillance for governments will become more attractive to them, because already the big advertisers, first of all, there will be less of them because there's less businesses selling to mass markets at this point. I mean, even the big clothes chains are going out of business. So there won't be as much of a big advertising budget. Plus, there's been last 2 years, there has been a lot of reports coming from the advertising industry saying that basically Google and Facebook were lying about their results, about the actual success in reaching the right people. The other thing that's a little bit disturbing, sorry if I'm just mentioning the disturbing today, but the other thing that's a little bit okay, there's also negative, about negative advertising, yeah? No, not so much negative advertising, what's the word for it? Customer discrimination, let's say. This is totally illegal, I think, in the US as well as the EU, but in the US it's even been it's being challenged now. You know those agreements that the big platforms make to make list of undesirable customers. Yeah, because basically it's no longer the product that's ranked, it's you, the consumer, who is ranked. And the result is that they are prepared to, sorry, my phone is battery. So, I mean, okay, if you don't have any particular ethical problems with that, you can always make money doing that, contributing to a pool of data to judge who is a good customer and who is not worth it. And then you can either charge more to the one who's not worth it, or make them wait longer on the help call, or serve them lesser interesting products. So that's what people are doing now. But I mean, how long can that business go on? It doesn't look like a very promising idea.
Mm.
I think probably the most, if I was to go into some kind of business now, if I had the competence and the cash, let's say, I'd look for solutions that were that were as low tech as repairable as possible. You know, those very simple solutions where you can actually uh, uh, connect to a network. I think there was a case in Venezuela of someone who figured out a way to operate a phone and a Bitcoin wallet, even in an environment where there was no access to electric power. Are you aware of that?
No, I first got it.
No?
Yeah, no, that's very new to me.
Okay, I'll find the link and I'll send it to you. It's well
Yeah,
worth,
good.
because this is, imagine what it would be great to have a simple solution like that
Mm.
in after a big disaster. That's exactly what you need. A very easily, so a piece of communication device like a phone, basically, which also is a digital money wallet that you can keep with you at all time, that you can even use if there's no electricity around. I can't remember how it worked, but it seemed like a very interesting solution.
Mm.
So you can actually transport your wealth with you. You don't have to carry gold along. Yeah?
Mm.
But not your wealth, but some amount of usable currency. Yeah,
Mm-hmm. I see. Yeah, that
that's the
sounds.
kind of solution I would look into. You know, because whatever large governments buy from all these kind of small players collecting data legally, otherwise, yeah, whatever governments pay for it or large companies pay for it, they can just as well crush you tomorrow by taking all your data and not pay you. So it's a bit risky to play as a small player, to start prisoner of a big walled garden. So I think things are going to change, but we're just at the beginning of the change now. So it's difficult to find. It's a difficult environment to operate right now.
I see. So in addition to the consumer protections, maybe we see a lot of the new compatible adequacies, such as the US, the EU has their own data protection and privacy regulations. In terms of those, the
The
granularly
US doesn't
level
have
is,
one. California has one.
yeah, the against. I think this year's the privacy sealed in EU and the US has been
Yeah.
embodied. Then I think that geopolitically is, so those data transferring is a key part of the topics for the corporations is running a business in the multiple continents. And also you see from your insights, then after the Brexit and between the EU, the UK needs the adequacies then between the data
That's a
transparency.
big problem. Yes.
So how do you envision those kind of the argument will be come up to the any solutions? So maybe the US still has surveillance regulations, and the EU is rejected this time. So how we can take a settlement in each other's?
Well, I tell you what. Right now, there's plenty of opportunity for Japan to cooperate with the EU, because I think the EU would only be too happy for a start. But that's an aside. Okay, so this is. I think because these are so integrated as economies, I'm talking the UK, the EU, and the US on digital matters. They will have to find a way I think in the short term, what's going to happen is they will pass something in the US to make it seem like it's progressing in some kind of harmony with the EU. Yeah, they'll find a way to elevate to try uniformize the situation across EU, UK, and US and Canada, of course, and whether that's whether that's actually genuinely working, I won't. I mean, we'll only find out afterwards. But at least on paper, they will try and make it more or less. They'll probably just kind of either for real or pretend having bringing the US. Elevate the US privacy priorities higher so that they go back to cooperating as if normal. And in any case, I don't know what's going to happen with the UK, but I'm pretty sure they will have to solve it very quickly because the data flow between the rest of the EU and the UK is the biggest of all the data flows cross countries. And I mean, the UK is probably the biggest player as far as data is concerned with the EU because it's the biggest in fintech. It's the biggest in. It's one of the biggest in AI, if not the biggest. I mean, it's the biggest in many areas. Partner to the EU, so it's unless they're really suicidal, I don't see how the UK would not make that a priority to try find some legal basis on which they can be considered harmonious with the EU, in harmony with the EU rules. Besides, they already are de facto. I mean, so the only way they wouldn't be in harmony is if they decide to cancel some of the rules they already have absorbed internally. But this, in the short run, none of those players can afford to be isolated from the other for very long, because that would be economically very problematic for everyone. So they have to be political about it, I suspect. So there will be some kind of a treaty, some kind of an agreement where everyone will pretend things are fine because they all guarantee each other some amount of protection. And then either this will happen for real, or they'll do like what happened with shrimps, which is they'll go on pretending for as long as the general public is not paying too much attention.
Yeah, I understand. Yes, since Japan and the UK made a trade agreement, some cautiousness, such as the United Kingdom, the humanitarian organization is claiming that whether the UK and Japan trade agreement is going to affect in terms of data transference. They also, yeah.
Where is the problem there? Where is the problem?
I suppose they said that Japan has whether they have adequacies between the rules in UK and Japan. Yeah, they have some suspicious transferring the UK's data to US through Japanese services. We have to commit, be protective. The Europeans, they also the UK's, the people's personal data, not just released to anybody's. However, we see a lot of data breaches in recent years. So we have to commit more things.
Is it much different right now, the culture of data privacy in Japan? I don't think so, is it?
It is a kind of the balances. So we choose other countries as third-party services, such as the UK company is, US companies are providing some software services. We use it for data storages or
You mean the
operations.
cloud policy? Cloud policy. Yeah. This is a
Yeah,
big
no.
problem for everyone now. But I think, from the point of view of governments, the problem is legal. Is a legal one. Sorry, if you hear meow, that's my cat. I, she's very noisy today. My cat. I can't show
That's
you because my camera's not working. Otherwise, I would.
good, good.
So what did I mean to say? Yes. Okay. So the problem is a legal one. Uh, that's actually the crux of the problem. That's where it becomes a matter of sovereignty, which is whose law applies basically.
Yeah.
If you have your, and so that's why I think the more interesting, I think, where this matter will be decided now is probably precisely between Japan and China and Australia and all that, because whatever happens there, the US will not be able to do any less. So if you guys manage to agree on something that is protective or a principle of locating your data in each other's countries or not doing it, whatever happens there, the US and the EU will probably need to do as much as that and no less. So I suspect we'll find that if there's no solution there, then there won't be any solution on our side either. But at some point, I mean, right now, there's no way. Even the Commission's own information is collected by Microsoft. So God knows where it goes. Besides, I was talking with privacy experts last week, and they were telling me, Gaelle, the GDPR is all well and good, and the privacy principles are all well and good for storage, but even if you store it locally, it's not protected in the process of getting there. So it's the entire infrastructure and data, how do you say, the entire configuration of the internet, which would have to change at this point. Which is exactly what China is seeking to do, but I don't know that. I don't think the EU is all too happy with the proposal that China is presenting right now. I'm not saying about the general public. The general public is not aware, but I know that at the UN, I mean, at the ITU and at the UN, there's a proposal right now from China, which would potentially solve that at least, but it also creates other problems, and so. Right now, I'm not sure that that people would be happy about it. So that's another thing we should look at: is what kind of hardware developments happen. For example, if you have security on a chip, if you protect your data on a chip in some secure, very secure fashion, then that could be a game changer. Otherwise, the other game changer is what China is proposing, which is changing the entire way the internet operates. The actual, I'm looking for the word, the actual mapping of the flows. Yeah.
Thank you. So lastly, I'd like you to give the message or kind of the future collaboration in between the European Union and Japan. You gave me 3 insights from the European perspective: the digital single market, the fair competitions, besides the fair trade. Those 3 parts is the key elements to develop in each other's after the Horizon 2020. Which was the development and research in a stage, but from the next years, Europe is been upgrading the digital economies. So we see the great collaboration in between those countries together. Then please give a message to listeners, not only for the Japanese people, but also we see some foreigners to come close together. So please a message.
I really hope. Sorry, I really hope the cooperation is intensified with Japan, because I think at all level there's a lot of similarities there, and I suspect that even in the general public in Europe, there's a lot of more interest all of a sudden about Japan. I can tell you at home, I have never been so exposed to Japanese culture because my daughter is super interested. To the point that she's learning all sorts of Japanese expressions. So because we have there's very similar, from what I can tell, because of course I've not been to Japan yet, but from what I can tell, there's very similar aspirations, but also similar thinking and similar aspirations, yeah, to have to create some room for creativity, yeah, for smaller players as well. So I suspect that we will have I expect we will have the same sort of strong encouragement to collaborate in research in the next program, the one that's about to start next year, for which the budget is about to be made available. And that works really well when it works. Huh? The problem is not, I presume for Japanese people, there's only one representation of the EU in Japan. So they may not always have the opportunity to relay the information, but on data issues, on digital currency issues, on applications, on just about anything, the opportunity to cooperate is there. It's very easy to do. Once this agreement is in place, because it's only one selection process, which is where the chances go from 1 in 4 to 1 in 8 to get funding, and for under the research programs, I mean, and the EU is making a lot of effort to open the program to small organizations and new organizations and new companies. So they would even fund ways of bringing people together once we can all travel again. There's also funding for that. So anyone on the Japanese side with any kind of interest in developing a network of potential collaboration with the EU should go directly to the delegation of the representation, of the EU in Japan, which is in Tokyo, or ask them to keep informed of developments on the funding side, because there will be a lot of demand on that side.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. Then, since I established the not-for-profit, the association is just needs to collaborate with the EU. Japan is just the private sectors. So they need to understand the importance of data protections from the consumer privacies. So we see that a lot of the space to work together. And it's a very grateful time to talk with you this moment for the directions.
Sorry, just before you conclude,
please.
Perhaps what's missing is exactly what you're doing. Perhaps what's missing is a collaboration on informing everyone else. Perhaps that's one thing that should be started, a joint news production that made sure to produce, because all of us, my first language is French, of course, and yours is Japanese, but we all have to operate in English, okay, fine. But we don't have to, right now we all rely on information that is mostly American. But there's no reason not to, I mean, international information about the sector. But perhaps we should have more specific information flows about this, some kind of information source. Perhaps it's something you and I should think about, let's say.
Yeah, absolutely. That's very helpful.
So
So
that was it.
yeah, thank you for Gary this times to join with me today on the interviews. Let's
It
keep
was
an
a pleasure.
updates. Then let's make an effort. It's just timing to turning point to go to the next. So yeah, thank you for coming this times.
Thank you, and keep me informed of what goes on your side, and I'll do my best on my side.
Sure. Thank you.
Okay.